No one has the right to place timetables on the Iraq government. It was elected by its people. Noor al-Maliki, Iraqi Prime Minister.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. Mr. Berkman, you were saying now that there's a will in Washington. They're looking at a way to overthrow Prime Minister Maliki. But realistically, is that feasible? And would that help in anything?
Well, here's the thing. Let me say this. I think that I think there's still some thinking that needs to be done before something like this would happen. This is me thinking. This is my thinking about how President Bush gets out of the growing political quandary. Because as you saw from John Warner, Senator Warner of Virginia, Senator Lugar of Indiana, a lot of powerful Republican senators now are calling for major troop withdrawal for by the end of the year. If you're George Bush, how do you get out of doing that? I can't see any way he can get out of doing that besides getting rid of Maliki. And I do think that Bush, frustration has grown and grown and grown and grown. I think there's a sense in the White House that they picked the wrong guy, that he's just not up to this job. But I wouldn't, even if this occurs, and I think it might, I wouldn't draw any conclusions over there about some kind of setback for Iraqi democracy. I think Iraqi democracy is moving along nicely. It still requires American help and support. There's no question about that.
But would it be a setback for Iraqi security, for Iraq's security, for the lives of people on the streets?
I definitely don't think it's a setback for Iraq's security, because I don't think, again, I just don't think, I agree with the line of reasoning that Maliki is just not up to the job. I think he's tried. I don't think he's tough enough for it. I don't think he has the right background for it. I just don't think he can do it. So I don't think it's a setback at all for Iraq's security. I think there are those who will make the argument that it's somehow a theoretical setback for Iraq's democracy, but I don't even think that.
Mr. Lever, don't you think that if Prime Minister Maliki goes, the sectarian strife could rise a lot?
I'm mixed on that. I mean, in some sense, you know, I haven't gotten the sense that Maliki is helping really keep the glue together. You have, you know, the governing council of some 24 Iraqis who have been, you know, involved in a lot of the day-to-day operations, and you know, the military, to most extent, is loyal to different sectarian militias, and so as long as those leaders of those groups are able to kind of keep the lid on, and the U.S. is able to keep contact with the Iraqi military, I'm not, you know, I don't know, you know, what sort of uprising we would see. The one interesting thing, and the cautionary note would be, you know, outside of the militias, what would be the reaction of the Iraqi people? And again, I think that there's so much association with the current Iraqi government with the U.S. occupation that in some sense, you know, people would be very happy to see it go.
Mr. Ali Dabar, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
Dr. Ali, I just wanted to ask you now, you're hearing all what our guests are saying. You heard what is coming out, the criticisms coming out of Washington. Is there anything Prime Minister Maliki can do to change his image, to really show that he is trying to do his best?
We do understand here in Iraq the legitimate worry of the families of the Americans, so, the army here in Iraq. And definitely we do appreciate what all they are doing here in Iraq. But I don't think that this will incite anyone to speak about the Iraqi people in this way.
Dr. Ali, you're talking about the Iraqi people, so let's concentrate on the Iraqi people. Many say that it's Iraq's leaders that are dividing them, that they actually did not have any of these sectarian problems. So what do you tell them when Iraq's leaders are completely paralyzed in their government, can't go ahead with any legislation, they're getting criticisms from their biggest ally, Washington, and they're continuing to die every day on the streets? What do you tell them?
The thing, as long as it belongs to Iraqis could do all the measures needed, even changing al-Maliki. This could be a victory for democracy, could be a victory for the Iraqi people if they decide to change this government or decide to change al-Maliki and replace him with somebody which Iraqi people feel that he could fix all the problems. This is, I think, is a victory for Iraqis and victory for even United States, because at the end, Iraqi people are performing with democracy.
Mr. Lever, do you think changing the Prime Minister is a solution, or is just some cosmetic surgery to go ahead with the electoral campaign in the U.S.?
Well, I think that it does have, some resonance here around the electoral campaign, but I can't stress enough that whatever decisions should be made would have to be done inside of Iraq. This is not a decision for Washington to be making. And I think that the most positive thing that Washington could do would be to de-link itself from the government by setting a timetable for withdrawal, by letting Iraqis know that the government is theirs, that the U.S. isn't going to stand by for the next decade and tell Iraqis when they need to change a prime minister or when they need to sign an oil law. Like, these decisions need to be made by Iraqis.
Mr. Berkman, you want to interfere?
But they're not ready for that. See, the thing of it is, I wish we were there. I think that's great talk, but we're just not there yet. If you do that, the whole thing could collapse, and you'll wind up with a terrible civil war, and you'll wind up with some other kind of dictator coming in there. You have to nurture a democracy along. Let's just talk Turkey here. This thing is still in the colonial stage. Iraq right now is an American occupation and an American colony. We are trying our best to nurture along this democracy. Look, the only way you get people to the table right now is if the Americans pay them, okay? Let's just cut through the crap and tell it like it is. Hopefully that will change. Washington is trying its best to make that change, but we're not there yet. So you just can't have this situation where you're going to say Washington needs to stay out, because if Washington stays out, the whole thing will collapse, and every observer in the world knows that.
But Mr. Berkman, the situation today, it's after 4 years, is also the responsibility of Washington. So to turn around and to say,
sure,
we are really unhappy with the Prime Minister, at a certain point he inherited a country that was already ridden with sectarian violence. It had already started, the Civil War had already started.
Well, I don't think anybody thinks he's bad. I don't think anybody thinks he didn't try to do a good job. I don't think anybody thinks he's not a good guy. I think there is a growing sense here that he is just not up to the job. That it's a capability issue. It's not a morality issue. I just think he can't do it.
Okay, is there anyone they think who can do the job? Is Washington looking at anyone who can do this job?
I'm sure they are. I don't know what names are on the short list, but I'm sure they are. I think you're going to see you're going to see somebody a lot tougher, I'll tell you that.
Mr. Lieber, what do you think? Are they going to try to really change him?
Certainly there's been a lot of talk, both in terms of a military coup, and then inside of Iraq, we've seen a number of the secular parties joining with Sadr, talking about putting a challenge there. So there's certainly, I think, change is in the wind, but we'll have to see if that's, imposed from Washington or if it bubbles up inside of Iraq.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. My thanks to all my guests, Eric Lever, Jack Berkman, and Dr. Ali Dabbar. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join us next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.